You know those moments that you always have reading One Piece where like you read something and then you realize, hold on now.
Wait a minute.
Oda said this 20 years ago or 22 years ago in a previous arc, and then now it's being brought back again to the story. Oh, no way. Yes, it's one of these moments once again, but this time it's 25 years ago. Whew. At the very beginning of the One Piece story, Oda is bringing something back from the dead, and he has never addressed it for 25 years in the story. Not even a small hint of this in the story up until, I'd argue, now.
Crazy.
And this, of course, based on the title, you can tell, Zoro and Mihawk. So recently in chapter 1073, something very interesting happened between Zoro and Mihawk. I'm actually lying, not with Mihawk, but with S-Hawk, the Seraphim clone counterpart of Mihawk. So we do see in that same chapter, Lilith is going to stop the Seraphim with a command order, but S-Hawk is about to take her out with an attack. Before that happens, in comes Zoro, and he shuts down S-Hawk's attack. So then Zoro comments about how S-Hawk looks a little more human than him. Quote him, probably referring to Mihawk, since that's who S-Hawk is, of course, cloned after. But that's not what I'm talking about for this video. No. Maybe in the future, fine, but not for this video, nursery. Because what I'm talking about was the instant sweat that S-Hawk got the moment he clashed with Zoro. Shocked and kind of confused for an entity that doesn't have much personality at all, but nonetheless, shocked and confused, and then when they disengage, he's back to normal. S-Hawk is. So this caught my attention because it reminded me what happened 25 years ago in the story when Zoro and Mihawk first fought in chapter 51 of One Piece, in the legendary, quote, Zoro falls into the sea chapter, where we see in that fight, Zoro and Mihawk have their final clash. And then Zoro does the 3,000 worlds against Mihawk. And then what we see is a small panel of Mihawk sweat before they dash and clash through each other. And then Zoro's swords break, and then Zoro gets that cut. So ultimately, the question here is, hold on now. Why did Mihawk sweat at that point in time, in that small panel, where we see him in the next page, like literally the next page, he beats Zoro. He breaks his swords and everything. He's clean. Why does he sweat? It is a bit weird, I think, and I've always wondered, why did Mihawk sweat at that particular moment? But now here we are, 25 plus, like literally, 25 plus years later, and the clash between S-Hawk and Zoro, I think, does give us more context on that particular moment. So in the previous chapter of the main Zoro versus Mihawk fight, in chapter 50, Mihawk does mention how a competent swordsman can tell, based on a glance, essentially, the skill gap between someone like himself and them. And what's very interesting is that we have seen other swordsmen kind of do similar things in various ways across the story. So for example, remember how someone like Rayleigh, with this observation haki, could actually sense the strength, the power level, if you would, of all of the creatures on Ruskaina that were stronger than Luffy. So Rayleigh clearly has a very good scouter. Now there are other moments in the story where other characters kind of do stuff that's ish similar, like for example, Big Mom sensed something unique and amiss, dangerous about Enma, and she was warning Kaido about said sword. But this does not seem to be as intricate or as detailed as someone like Rayleigh saying, hey, these creatures on this whole island are stronger than you, Luffy. Rayleigh's comprehension of strength gauging seems to be better than Big Mom. So I'm not gonna say that only Rayleigh can do it, but so far he's been the only one, I think, as far as I recall, to do it. Just how someone like Usopp could visually see the auras of individuals through the walls in Dressrosa, but other, again, top tier users of that same ability have not shown that ability outside of Usopp. But we're not done yet though, because outside of that scope here, outside of hockey, you can argue, recall the beginning of the Zoro versus Ryoma Brook fight in chapter 466. Ryoma feels like he's about to fight against a beast when he's in front of Zoro. And Oden makes a similar comment to Roger before Roger gives Oden the divine departure. Oden, of course, being a top-tier swordsman. So these right here, I think, are 3 examples of skilled swordsmen being particularly keen when it comes to gauging someone's combat ability. Zoro himself has even done this a few times against random opponents. Like, for example, T-Bone, all the way back in between Water 7 and his lobby, when he fought against the ship slasher T-Bone on the track rails in chapter 371. Before they engage in combat, he calls T-Bone fierce. And it's hinted for damn sure, that Mihawk has very good observation haki and keen insight in a general sense. Like, for example, we see how in Marineford War, he could pinpoint Luffy's location and snipe him with a air cut attack in the middle of that battlefield. And you can argue, let's say in a roundabout way, in Volume 4 Billion for Film Red, what we find out about Shanks could also indicate the strength of Mihawk's observation haki, since Shanks and Mihawk had daily duels way back when. So when it comes to this keen insight, whether it is haki related or not, it's kind of unclear. But what is clear is the level of swordsmanship, I think, that Zoro displayed at that moment against Mihawk. So remember what Mihawk said in chapter 779. Where he says in that flashback, if Zoro had simply hardened his blades with haki, then at that point in time, Mihawk would have broken Zoro's swords. And we know now that those 2 swords are trash because we see the blacksmith of those swords, Shimotsuki Kozaburo, say as much in 1033. So the level of the first 3,000 worlds that Zoro did against Mihawk, when he thought it was his last chance to claim the dream that him and Queen were fighting for all those years, must have been absolutely tremendous to make someone like Mihawk sweat, even for an instant. Before the final blow was struck, he tore open a portal of time and flung him into the future where his evil is law. I'm sorry. I love that show. In that instant, I think it's very possible that Mihawk could actually see some iteration of the great swordsman that Zoro could one day become. The foundation of Zoro's skills at that point in time had reached an apex, and as you could argue that the 3,000 worlds is still Zoro's greatest Santoryu attack. You can actually argue that, I think, to this day. You really could. And S-Hawk getting that instant sweat when he's clashing against Zoro in the latest chapters, I think indicates in a subtle way as well, this sort of strong, keen insight that a lot of swordsmen tend to display, particularly when they're gauging one another. Because Zoro now, after Wano Country, is even known in his new bounty as the Master Swordsman, even though S-Hawk lacks a lot of personality, I think the fact of the matter is that he got a glimpse and understanding of the magnitude of the swordsman that is currently Roronoa Zoro. Of course, S-Hawk, being a clone of Mihawk, he would even have a higher degree of this insight, maybe even observation haki, though yet to be seen when it comes to haki and the Seven at all. But I think in a general sense, would have a much greater insight on these things, and therefore not just get, let's say, a glimpse of the magnitude of Zoro now, but of what Zoro can be come the end of the series. Just how potentially Mihawk, when he first took on that 3,000 worlds, could have seen something similar. And it only makes sense that someone like S-Hawk could be able to actually perceive that because he is Mihawk's clone. They share the same lineage factors, and we know that lineage factors do contain memory within them. Just how you could argue that Zoro's lineage factors carries the memories of maybe his ancestor Ryoma, just as Ushimaru's DNA before him does.
Maybe.
Regardless, I think in the future, when Oda gets to the long-awaited Zoro versus Mihawk fight, there are going to be a lot of callbacks and a lot of references to their first fight for damn sure. I think it's very likely that we're gonna have this similar moment brought up again. It wouldn't surprise me if when this happens in the future, we get a clear understanding of the type, the caliber of swordsman, potentially beast, keywords, B-E-A-S-T, the kind of beast that Mihawk saw within Zoro at that point in time in the past, and at that point in time when Zoro takes him down. That's what I think. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below on this topic video. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to rate it, subscribe to your boy, and of course, click on that bell to join the notification squad. I'm gonna see you cats on the flip side.